Hello, family members. Hope you're having a nice day today. I would like to talk to you today about Africa, specifically South Africa and their white refugees that Donald Trump has just admitted to the United States while refusing actual refugees admittance at the same time because, the cruelty is the point, of course. But I, unlike a lot of other Americans I know, have always been pretty interested in South Central Africa, especially, but Africa in general, because I've always or almost always known somebody from there. I remember meeting my second family from Zimbabwe when I was in elementary school. I went to a summer camp where we had like counselors from all over. It was a Christian summer camp. And they had counselors from all over the world, including several white South Africans. I've known people from South Central Africa most of my life. And so I've always paid more attention to what's going on over there than many of my peers because it had personal significance to me. I mean, I had heard that Trump was trying to bring over Afrikaner refugees. And I did a little digging before I actually decided to make this video and found out this is something that he has been trying to do at least since like 2018. This is not a new thing. I don't know for certain because you don't know what a person's motivations are. But I think that a lot of this comes back to that, great replacement theory, conspiracy theory thing. This idea that the white race is under attack and at risk of being wiped out or replaced or harmed or whatever. But it's just not true, I mean, number one, what the heck is the white race? It's kind of funny because if you called an Italian Portuguese, you'd probably be pretty offended, right? Because they're proud of their identity and who they are and don't feel like they should be mixed up. But probably most people would look at both individuals and think that they have some sort of racial harmony. And that's sort of the problem, the deep-rooted problem in Africa, is that when the scramble for Africa happened in the, I think it was like the 1870s, there was, a little bit of colonization in Africa, like a marginal amount, like some 5-10% of Africa was colonized by Europeans. By 1914, it was about 90%. Within, just like a 40-year period, you had all these different empires in Europe just rushing as fast as they could to claim as much land as possible. And as they divided up their holdings and divided their holdings into smaller, regional countries, provinces, whatever, they didn't always take into consideration the differences between African peoples. Not all African people are ethnically the same. They all have, I'm sorry, there's all different groups in Africa, within the same regions, within the same countries. And that has led to a lot of conflict throughout the 20th century, 21st century. that post-colonialization period in, I don't know, like World War II period. That's when things really started getting very shaky, because you had people who lived there who were of European descent, and their governments were no longer going to necessarily be the colonial rulers, but they wanted to keep that power. And it was Afrikaners, which are people who are of Dutch descent in South Africa. The reason why we in America tend to think of South Africa as being related to England and speaking English is that they did colonize the area, but the Dutch had actually been, living there. Some Dutch people had been living there because of trading. You've got to go around the tip of Africa to get to India, and so there had been an established population there, and they speak Afrikaans as their primary language. I think it's probably maybe like a half and half. White South African people are either Afrikaner speakers natively or English speakers natively. Like, which I did not realize it was that big of a percentage. And, if you've read Trevor Noah's book like I have, you'd know that there's a lot of other languages in South Africa too, not just English. And so I think it's kind of funny we have this perception of South Africa being a place where people speak English, and it's like, well, kind of. But it's a lot more complicated than that, like most of Africa. The funny thing to me is how we have all this going on. Trump's spending so much time focusing on these people and this, very small ethnic minority who owns way too much of the property. I mean, from like 1948 until 1994, I believe, it was Afrikaner rule apartheid, That's not really that long ago. And it's really hard to get individuals who have some power and influence to, give it up even when that's the right thing to do. So yeah, it's been an awkward anti-apartheid period too. I mean, there's a lot to say about South Africa. But while we're focused on this, we're not focused on something else that's happening in like South Central Africa that's possibly way more consequential. And I think it's because it embarrasses us, Western powers, so thoroughly. So to the north of South Africa, quite a ways, you have to go north through Zimbabwe and Zambia, I believe, before you get to Rwanda. Rwanda is a country that was actually under Belgian rule, but it was sort of surrounded by English-speaking rule, and there's some very complicated political connections there. But Rwanda would really, really like to take the 2 or 3 easternmost provinces of the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. The DRC is an extremely, extremely resource-rich place. But it has had a very unstable government for quite some time, and isn't doing a very good job as far as like trading with the United States and other Western powers from our perspective, right? I mean, it's all from our perspective. Well, they have rare earth minerals. There are certain minerals that there are not that many places on Earth where you can locate them. And some of those extremely rare minerals are very important for modern life. Cell phones, tablets, they couldn't exist without these rare earth metals. And if you couldn't get them from Africa, there's few other places where you could get them from. Well, some time ago, Rwanda decided that it wanted to take those provinces, and it invaded. And the Western powers were like, no, we're not going to let you do that. And they kicked in sanctions and basically indirectly or directly pressured Rwanda into giving up that ambition. And the leaders of Rwanda were smart, and they saw that, and they learned from it. And what they have done is they started going into the DRC and taking those minerals on the sly and selling them to Western powers, and got Western powers more and more dependent on Rwandan rare earth metals. But Rwanda basically does not have rare earth metals. That does not come from Rwanda. Any Rwandan rare earth metals were essentially stolen from the DRC. And once they got us dependent on that supply, then they invaded again. Just this last January. I didn't know about it until fairly recently, which is wild. Because again, I pay more attention to what's going on in Africa than the general person. I have a neighbor across the street who's from Uganda. Like, I am a little more interested in that region than your average American. Rwanda, Uganda, DRC, all of that. I've been kind of keeping an eye on that, and I had missed this. And I'm not too surprised that the Western powers that be have done a good job of making sure this was not much of a story in the United States, because it really reflects badly on us. We can't do the right thing, you see. We can't push back on this illegal invasion of the DRC because we are dependent upon them. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't step in like we did with Ukraine, which it's essentially the same thing. There's a lot of ethnic complexity. We had the Hutus and the Tutsis, and if you've heard of the Rwandan genocide, it was between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And again, you have different populations of primarily Tutsi descent or Hutu descent in the DRC and in Rwanda, and to a certain extent Uganda. And it makes it so complicated because even though they're separate countries, they have interests in populations in those other countries that they can either exploit for their own economic gain, as Rwanda has, or use it as a justification for invasion, the same way Rwanda and Russia have done here. Russia and Ukraine and Rwanda and the DRC. So it's still the echoes of that European scramble for Africa in the sort of post-Civil War period, our Civil War, mind you, you know, late 19th, early 20th century. And after apartheid was dismantled, there have been times when white Africans who are hoarding resources have had their homes or properties seized by black South Africans, either formally through their government or otherwise. Now, that's primarily, I think, in other countries. I don't think that's happened as much in South Africa. I don't want to say no white South African has ever faced violence because of their race, but it's not just their race, of course. It's the fact that they're hoarding resources. And it's just so much more complicated than Trump or any of his cronies are ever going to want to characterize it. I don't know. I really tried to see if I could find out more about the specific people that were brought here, that came here. But I really couldn't find much. Maybe that'll come out in the coming days and weeks, and I can kind of get some sense of idea of what their motivation is for being part of this publicity stunt. I don't know that they would really have much of a improvement in their quality of life coming here, especially as refugees. But, I mean, if a woman can call a child a racial slur and then crowdsource hundreds of thousands of dollars, well, maybe they can find enough people with right-wing grievances to give them money so they can have a nice start out in a different colony instead. From one colonial society to another. Lovely. Well, post-colonial, I guess. It's just absolutely ridiculous how Americans look at Africa. It is a giant continent with all sorts of different peoples living different kinds of lives, different cultures, different points of view on all sorts of things. And I think that like South America, we tend to just sort of lump it into one group and then mostly ignore it. And the global South, that's a real phenomenon. For whatever reason, we took the continents, the northern latitudes are oppressing and depressing those from the mid to south mid latitudes. And I don't know how long it'll stay that way. I really don't. But I hope that people start learning about the complexities of the nations in these depressed regions. It's so easy to dehumanize, My second mother from Zimbabwe. Her family's actually South African. She actually speaks one of the languages with the like clicking. And she used to speak it around me. She asked me if I remembered, and I was like, no, I'm sorry. I really wish I did. I remember one word of Shauna, and that's it. Family members, I'm going to have to cut this one a little short. My dog needs to go outside. So hopefully you got something from that. Not the dog you saw, of course. The other one. The other one was standing there and giving me eyes. So take care of yourselves, family members. I love you.